In this video, I'll be talking about, as you can clearly see here, even though it's spelled wrong, armors. I will be talking about the different types of armors a player can acquire, what the items actually do, how do they affect the gameplay, and lastly, what's the importance of having an armor in the first place. Now, we start off with the fact that all the armors, as well as weapons later on, will be diverging down a path where they are considered by rarity. They are categorized by rarity. So you will have common, uncommon, rare, epic, and legendary types of armors, weapons, items, accessories, supplies, materials, so on and so forth. There'll be items that you wouldn't get normally, and those are considered uncommon. If there are items you basically would never see in your life, other than this one moment, that would be considered legendary. This is the kind of thing. Weapons and armors and pretty much everything in the game can be categorized down to those 5 categories. Common, 60% of the game will be made up of common weapons. 20% of the game will be made up of uncommon. 10% of the game will be made up of rare. 5% will be made up of epic, and another 5% will be made up of legendary. So, in this ideal, this is essentially what you would see first of all. Now, the armors have been split up to be even amounts for each section instead of them being like, the majority in one area or another. Now, the first armor we meet is the leather armor. This armor is essentially the base armor for all players. They start off with this no matter what. It is a flexible armor designed for leather, for light, medium, and heavy. Now, as you can see by its profile, say for instance, you got the leather armor name with the stock image, the common characteristic, and of course you see this after you come down. Well, the first thing you see is the durability is 550. It is a high amount of defense for an armor. Not only that, it's also priced at 100 gold, exactly the same amount as you would need to replace it. Now, its armor class is 34, which 17. It's not meant to be that high. Now, as you see, now you've got the info stats here, but we'll get to that a little bit. You see the inventory slot is 5. Now, here's the thing. When you have a weapon equipped, it doesn't take up an inventory slot. So you ignore that. So an armor that isn't equipped wouldn't take that much up. But if you have like a backup armor in your bag, that's a lot of space to take up. Not only that, these armors weigh like a metric ton. They do weigh quite a bit. Now, leather armor is light and durable, but when you combine it with metal sheets, which is what this armor is, it's a leather armor. It's basically made out of leather and plated pieces of bronze or iron, essentially. But it's not fully one item. Now, as you can see, it has a set of stat modifiers. This adds on to your character. So if you have basically like -2 in one stat, you add that on. That increases not the actual modifier. This increases the thresholds. Actually, no, sorry. This does increase the stat modifiers. So if you have like a -2, this in bronze, dexterity or constitution, you increase it by 1 in each of those sections. So basically, if my character had 0 in each of these categories, he now has a +1. Now, as you can see at the bottom as well, the character this has something that's meant to be designed to help characters play. That is noob protection. When worn, all characteristic stats the wearer has are decreased by 1 unless the total is 7 or above. In exchange, the damage is reduced by 10 for each affected stat. Meaning, as you can see here, there's actually 8 stats in total. This one has been updated. Well, most of the armors haven't been updated yet. But as you can see here, there are 7 stats. Brawn, dexterity, constitution, charisma, intelligence, wisdom, and willpower. And if all of those are below 7, you get 70% damage reduction. So when you are hit with an attack, you can say designatedly, I'm going to use my armor to protect me. Meaning the armor will take the entirety of the brunt of the damage. But most of the time, the players don't have access to this armor because I'm trying to test the game first of all. I have tested the armor as well, and it is it is very strong. It is very strong. So yeah, this most of the armors will need tweaks. Now, the iron armor is essentially a stronger version of the leather armor. It doesn't have the same stats as the other one, but it has a stronger um, preference. So the armor is slightly heavier. Its AC is stronger. It is also more expensive, as you can clearly see, and it's also got a special trait which is called Armor of the Ages, which is essentially it is essentially a trait that most armors have when you pick them up and wear them. So some armors will have Armor of the Ages 1 or 2 or 3, and that's the tier number. That explains how high the effect is upgraded. So this armor only gives a constitution of +1. Whereas here it says +2. That means you add 2 and 1 together. So you increase your constitution by 3, essentially, and your dexterity by 1. This is kind of the idea. Now, as you can see at the bottom, it says light, medium, and heavy, whereas this one just says medium and heavy. What does that mean? It essentially means that anyone under the categories of light, medium, and heavy can wield those, but anyone who's not under the category of medium or heavy, so if you're a light armor user, you can't equip this armor. That's the idea, to mitigate the game from being too from overpowering people with armor. Basically, the game is designed so that certain weapons can be used while other weapons should not. Oh, sorry, can't be used with your build. So if you're building a character that's purely fast, you want as little armor as possible. So you would go with light armors. But if you pick a heavy armor, you're going for more tanky builds. If you pick a medium armor, you're going for an in between. Now we move on to the uncommon armors. This section is more or less for special armors. Like I said before, for the weapons, special armors or special items are items that have gone through a bit of an upgrade in terms of their common variants. For instance, the bone armor. It doesn't have as much durability as the iron armor. It's cheaper though. It's supposed to weigh a lot less. Its armor class is negligible, really. And as you can see, it has a constitution of 3. But as you can see, the stat, or the trait of the armor itself, is what makes it stronger. Which is, when worn, increase the constitution by 2, plus decrease the of any beast monster within line of sight to wear it by 2. Meaning, they will take a minus or penalty to their stat with a -2. That is powerful. That is very powerful. As I've tested it, monsters, if you can do a psychological attack on them, they get weaker, and because of that, they're essentially like very susceptible to psychological influence or interference. Now, another armor which takes precedence over the leather armor, which is this one, the studded armor. Now, the studded armor isn't as strong as the bone armor. It is a lot cheaper. It is also lighter, as it's meant to be, but it's also a design of like, this increases your speed as well as being lightweight. So when unequipped, instead of taking a standard amount of inventory, so it's reduce the slot size iron by 2 and the weight by 20%, plus when equipped, the weight is reduced by 10%. So basically this goes from a 20 to an 18 when it's equipped, and when it isn't equipped, it goes from a 20 to a 16, because that armor is very lightweight. Not to mention, it gives a high charisma stat because of how good it looks on a person. Now we move on to the stronger armors. These armors are designed for, they haven't been tested per se, but they've been more or less been acquired by players. The scale armor is one of the few armors in the game that is unique because it has 2 stats that are different. Now, it has less armor, or less durability. It has higher pricing, The way ignore that. Its armor class is 30 plus. Now the reason it says 30 plus is because that means it can be higher with a conditional system within its own armor setting, as you see here. So, for instance, Magic Resistance 2, just like Armor of the Ages. Magic attacks used against you decrease the amount of damage done to you by 20% because it's made of scales from a dragon or wyvern, which was resistant to damage from magic. Now, flexibility is when an armor is worn by a user with a +6 stat in Dex, increase the stat by 1 and increase the armor rating by 2. That means this goes from a, say, good old 28 to 30. Now, the reason this is designed the way it is because it's a light armor designed for light wielders. It's not meant to be like a super strong, heavy defensive armor. So it's meant to assist light wielders into protecting themselves, essentially. Now we move on to a very unique armor of the set. A very not starting. This armor starts off a unique chain in the game. Now you can see there's something new about it. First off, you see that it's a rare, of course. It's mithril armor. Looks really nice. But you also see it says something here. Requires attunement. And then you see this. Now, of course, you see other things. Like the price is ridiculous. The durability is ridiculous. The weight alone is ridiculous. And then the stats, of course, are different. And then, of course, the traits are stronger. Very strong. But the attunement, you may be wondering, what does that mean? Now, in this game, there are two types of weapons. There are two types of items. Regular items and attuned items. Attuned items are important to know because attuned items have an effect. This effect is simple. When you try to equip the weapon or the armor or the item or pick it up, you must attune to it. Meaning you roll a d12 based on your willpower. So, if your willpower is a -2, -1, -3, whatever, you add that on, basically whatever that number modifier is, you add that onto the dice roll, and then you have to roll that required amount. Meaning, if you get a 6 or less, or sorry, if you get an 8 or less, no, if you get an 8 or higher, you completely attune to this armor, and it's now yours until you unequip it. If it's unequipped for more than a day in your inventory slot or in your inventory, then you have to do the attunement again. If you fail the attunement, you have to wait a whole day before you can attune to it again, just like if you already attuned to it. Now, as you can see, the brawn and the constitution and the willpower get affected by the mithril armor because of how strong it is. But of course, some people will already have immediately noticed that the magic resistance halves the damage of magic coming at you, and Armor of Ages increases your constitution by 4 and increases the armor rating by an additional 2. So it goes to 32. Now we move on to the truly broken items that haven't been tested yet, but are a concept. The reason they haven't been tested is because no players ever had the chance to acquire them. And the first one is, of course, a magic armor. An armor designed specifically for magic wielders, but at the same time, any wielder who uses magic. Now, as before, it has a magic attunement. It's also very pricey, has high armor class, has a very high durability. And as again, you can also notice this is the only one of the few armors we have seen so far that affects your intelligence, and that is very important because that affects your magical capability. That affects your magic, all in all. Now, it also has a higher brawn and constitution stat when in comparison to mithril. Like, it took 1 point from constitution and added an extra one into intelligence from after taking that one from there. Now, you can also notice the magic resistance is higher, and it also amplifies your magic. Now, you may be wondering, why is this armor so good? Well, it's because it's a stronger armor, and I'm wondering if this is really balanced. Now, yes, you can say it's not balanced, but I ask you this: it's an epic armor It's meant to feel like you're wearing the end game armor. And of course, the end game armors always are the best. So, for instance, this armor, Obsidian armor, heavily, heavily tough, extremely strong AC, weighs a metric ton because of the fact that the material it's made of is extremely heavy. The Constitution alone makes it just an absolute tank of an entity. But of course, the price, 4,000 gold. In retrospect, a single gold coin is like $100. So 4,000 times 100, that's 40,000 pounds or $40,000 you're spending on a single item. That's worth it. Now, of course, you can see damage resistance goes up to 50%, meaning that you don't take. And again, this is the first one you see, damage resistance. Not the magic resistance or physical resistance of other items have had. Damage resistance reduces anything coming in. And the armor of ages is increasing this further. Now, we move on to the last of the armors. Now you may be wondering, why is it that there is a legendary characteristic when there have been barely a mention of legendary items? That is because legendary items are a problem for this game. Now this may be contradictory for me, but I like the idea of an item that is scripted. An item that is not meant to be used normally, but is meant to be used in a scenario. Take for instance Elden Ring's use of the serpent fight with the devil. You have this wonderful, wonderful item sitting in the corner of the room, heavily scripted to be used as the weapon you fight against with him. Most players wouldn't notice it. Fight the devil, get killed, fight the devil again and again and again and again and again and again until they look up how to beat him and then realize that there's a sword right next to them, 3 feet away. Heavily designed to fight against serpents. Now, I kind of like the idea of a scripted item because of the fact that it's an item that, while you can't really use it outside of battle, it makes you feel unrestricted by the game. That you have the power to wipe worlds away. But at the same time, I feel like those kinds of weapons you shouldn't just give out to players. While this is a weapon that they'll have to earn basically in the end game, it is something to be noted that those kinds of weapons have problems. Now, why does this bring up to my legendary items? Most of my legendary items haven't been built into the game because of how dangerous a legendary item sounds from just the thick of it. Like, as you saw previously. While the the epic items haven't been fully respec for the 1.5.0 version, that you can see they're very powerful. And with that kind of power, comes very much unnecessary amounts of unplayability. If players have too much power in their hands, they will get bored of it very easily. So, armor like legendary armor, for instance, as you take a look, doesn't have a lot of durability, right? Its armor class is basically massive. Its weight is not meant to be high, but it's negligible, basically. Its price, high. The reason for this is this stat right here. This singular trait changes how this armor works completely. The demigod armor. When wearing this, any damage by a weapon of rarity lower than epic is negated. Enemy attacks that have less than half the armor's AC is also negated. Meaning, if you don't have 50 armor class off the bat in your attack, you won't damage the person wearing this. You won't even break the armor. You won't even reduce the durability. And of course, if you aren't even hitting them with an epic item, you won't even hurt them. This is the concept for legendary weapons. Right here. This is the concept for legendary weapons, items, whatever. The game's idea is that every legendary weapon is a weapon, armor, consumable, throwable. They are considered scripted or one-time use. They won't work outside of that one-time use. Now, of course, there will be legendary weapons that are fixed to damage and legendary armors that have proper scaling. But for the moment, I'm not implementing legendary category until every other category is fixed. So, common items, done. Uncommon items, done. Rare items needs to be fixed. Epic items needs to be fixed. Legendary items, after all those are sorted, then I will go on to them. I hope you enjoyed these 3-part videos on armor, weapons, and monsters. And I hope you to read the last one, which is a special one, about currency, because in this game, economics exists, and it was painful to script. But I hope you enjoy it. See you in the next video. See you in the next video.